Thank you, Kayla, for that introduction. Okay, nagsukoax. Get ko nat samat sinopoa anok sisikoi. Nistu anokok sakoi na mahka. Numach tu Piikani. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this month's Creative Mornings Santa Fe talk. And I would like to thank the hosts and organizers for having me and allowing me to share my creative journey with you all today. The pattern for this month's Creative Mornings Santa Fe talk is pattern, which is the basic definition of repeated decorative design. My name is Terran Last Gun. My Blackfoot name is Sahkwena Mahka, which means last gun. It was transferred to me when I was about 10 years old and was my great-great-grandfather Dick Kipp's Blackfoot name, one of his Blackfoot names. So I'm very proud of that name. I'm a Piikani visual artist, and I'm a citizen of the Piikani Nation of Montana. To share with you who the Piikani people are, I have this map here. And for my nation, which is, like I said, the Piikani Nation of Montana, federally we're known as the Blackfeet Nation. And so a lot of people know us more commonly as the Blackfeet. We are one nation out of 4 that makes up the Blackfoot Confederacy. So on this map, you can see where the Blackfeet Reservation is. We border the Canadian border. And then the other 3 nations, which is Siksika, Kana, and Piikani, North Piikani, are located in Alberta. Our territory went from the Yellowstone River near Billings, Montana, all the way up to Edmonton, Alberta. And so we had this vast territory where we lived in the Great Plains. We bordered the Rocky Mountains. So all of that reflects in our culture and in our painted lodges, which is a huge influence on my work. But I just wanted to show you this map just to give you an idea and a sense of how large our traditional territory used to be. And now where we currently are in terms of our reservations, and in Canada, they're called reserves. And so this is, when I thought of pattern, I was like, well, how do I relate to pattern? Individually, collectively, as an artist, as a Piikani person? And across the Blackfoot Confederacy, we have these painted lodges. And they're just beautiful masterpieces, classic art of the Great Plains of North America. Pre-European invasion, and these were, if you came across these were just awe-inspiring. They're so great to see in person. The examples I'm showing today are from the early 1900s. Walter McClintock, who lived with various, my tribe, but also traveled to the other Blackfoot Confederacy nations, took all these great photographs in the early 1900s. And this is some perfect examples of the painted lodges. And so what are these painted lodges? They are, to me, sort of this spiritual lodge, this bundle, in a sense, this medicine. And when I say medicine, I'm meaning spirituality, holiness in that sense, not so much how we think of it in Western terms. And they can be broken up into 3 tiers. The bottom represents the land. As you can tell, there are all these clusters of polka dots, these discs that are on the bottom. Some of the lodges have triangular peaks, which represent the Rocky Mountains. The one on the far right has these mounds that represents the foothills or the rolling plains. And then over here, it's completely flat, representing the Great Plains that is just flat. And so in terms of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Piikani, we were located near the Rocky Mountains. So if you saw one with triangles, you had an idea that that's probably a Piikani person. Siksika lived out on the plains, so the flat, that's from Siksika, and then the hills are Kana. And so they lived out in the foothills. These examples here is the Horse Lodge, the Snake Lodge, and behind the Snake Lodge is the Elk Lodge. And then I'm not actually sure what this one is. There are some stuff on the top of it. And so, like I said, the bottom is land. The middle is the animal, weather element, different type of spiritual helper, protector, guidance. And then the top is the cosmos. And so most of the time it would be this black background and then polka dots representing the cosmos, the stars. And so really these painted lodges is Blackfoot people, it's our worldview, how we connect to the universe, how we connect to that territory I showed you, how we connect to these animals. You know, the horse was later introduced, but became such a prized animal for us. It helped us to get further out, and that's why our territory expanded so large, was because of the horse. So these are revered animals, revered weather elements. And if you came across a village of, say, 300 lodges, only 10 would be painted, and they were in the center of the large circle. And so it was usually leaders who had these painted lodges, people that were holy, that bundle holders, pipe holders. It wasn't just a normal person. And so, and no one really dared to copy or duplicate them. They had to be transferred. There was a ceremony involved. And so I'm very much aware of that knowledge, and I'm only pulling from the bottom, so the land and the cosmos. And so this is a great example of the hills, the bars, which symbolize trails or ripples sometimes if it's a water animal. And then the top is the cluster of stars. So the middle one is perfect with all the polka dots. And so when I started to think about pattern, I've thought of these that I'm really influenced by and inspired by. And how were we using pattern? How were we using geometric shapes and geometric abstraction? You know, I think of how we interpreted the world around us in such geometric ways, but then also figurative, pictorial animals, pictorial, a visual way of sort of interpreting our surroundings. On these two front two, so this is the antelope or the pronghorn lodge, but you can see there's a row of discs, and there's 7 of them. That symbolizes the Big Dipper for us. And so there's stories about the Big Dipper, and then so we're actually looking at the north side of this lodge. And then on the other side would be considered the south side. And on the south side, you have 6 discs that represent the Pleiades. And so we're very much connected to these different constellations. The sun is our creator, the moon is his wife, and their child is Morning Star, who's represented by Venus. And so I'm very much drawn to space maps, you know, what's in our solar system. The sun is our creator, and he provides light for all of us, not just Blackfoot people, but for humanity, our Earth, our planet. And so it's our star in our solar system. And so there's this, you know, I really am proud and just always excited to learn about these sky stories, these cultural narratives that we have about the stars and the land. And you can barely tell, but there's a train back there. And so this is a perfect example of how Western civilization was moving in. You know, we were being forced to be in these reservations. You know, wagons were being introduced. And so definitely there's a changing landscape here happening. And the last example I wanted to show of the painted lodges is this one, which is called the Big Rock Lodge. And so this is just a super powerful lodge. You have the Rocky Mountains at the bottom, and then you have this huge shape representing a rock. And so in Montana and Alberta, we have these what are called glacial erratics, and there are these huge boulders that got pushed out onto the plains during the Ice Age, and then when all the glaciers receded, they left these huge boulders. And they're powerful. You know, as Blackfoot people, we're very drawn to rocks and their medicine. You know, some of them are called medicine rocks, and people leave offerings. And so whenever me and my partner Samantha go home, we see these rocks out on my territory and I'm always trying to get to them as much as possible, just to be around them, feel that energy, feel that power. And my work definitely reflects sort of that energy, sort of that power. But yeah, this is just another great example of how we're connected to the land, connected to our surroundings. And this one actually doesn't have, it's all the bottom tier and the middle portion. You know, the top is completely plain. And so I think this one is actually really unique in that sense. And these lodges live on today. So if they ever got wore out, they were given back to the sun and sunk, put out on a lake and sunk and given back to the sun, and a new one was created and transferred, and it became reactivated. And so these, in a sense, they're paintings. We're using natural pigments, and they're these, what we could think of as artworks, but really they're more than that. They're alive, they're spiritual, they help that family that owns it, and then they help the collective. And so it's individual, collective, it ripples out. And I really enjoy that and love that about these painted lodges. And so I tried to think first I was thinking, how do I relate to pattern? And of course, I thought culturally and historically our lodges, since there's certain patterns on there. And as a young artist starting out, I was thinking, well, what should I do? And at II, they encourage you to look at your own cultural background. And when I was first starting out as an artist, I was very literal to just using multiple triangles, multiple mounds, creating patterns. But over time, I started to use single shapes. And so this is a 2016 work. The works I'll be presenting from here on are all of my work, but they are in chronological order, starting in 2016, moving up to the current. And so this is a great example of, very straightforward title, Abstract Landscape Number 1, 2016. It's a 3-color serigraph or screen print, and it's a editioned work. And so this was my background at II, was printmaking, specifically serigraphy. And I'm really trying to pull those shapes and use them in sort of different ways, pull those patterns, use them within those triangles, and then of course always including the sun, which is the huge pink disc. And it's just so powerful, I think, and that there's so much movement going towards it too, with these, what I would consider mountains, just my take on this abstract look of it. This is a rolling hill from 2017. Again, thinking of the foothills, thinking of those mounds, using it in different ways, thinking of those bars on top of the lodge, sort of dissecting them and reconfiguring different symbols in different ways that I felt is appropriate. Like I said, I haven't really done too many animals, that middle portion. I've tried to stay away from and only pull from the land and the cosmos. And so this is a great example of using that hill symbol, using these bands that symbolize the sky world, and then of course the sun. The sun pops up in my work a lot. And I think that's just because my father, he's also a ledger artist, a painter, and very much more figurative, representational works, warrior life. But he always has the sun and the moon and morning star in his work, and so I've always loved that about his work. This was Near the Backbone of the World in 2018. And so for the Blackfoot people, we refer to the Rocky Mountains as the Mistakiks, and one of the translations for that is the backbone of the world. We consider the Rocky Mountains the backbone of our earth, and that we live right near. And if you've ever been to Montana, to Glacier National Park, that's our territory, but it's now this national park, the peaks are all triangular. They're all super rocky, super jagged. So you could see, at least for me as a young Piikani artist, I could see why my ancestors were using this triangle shape to represent the mountains, because that's how they look. And then we have the stars here, the cluster of stars. And this was actually my first time where I started to incorporate murals with my solo exhibitions. And so it really, to me, is working with scale, and I have these sort of smaller works. And so it really complements the show, and I really like that, and I've continued that, as you'll see. And so this mountain symbol here, I'm also starting to move in on a single shape rather than multiple shapes. And so this was where I started to play with that too, where I'm giving more emphasis to a single shape. And color. Color, in my current practice, color and shape are a huge focus of mine that I really enjoy exploring and trying to create new shapes. And so you'll see that throughout the other slides as well. This was Sunbeam 10/1989, created in 2019. This is when I was starting to think about these doorways. And on those painted lodges, the examples I showed today didn't have them, but on the back side, there's these sort of square rectangular shapes that represent doors and sometimes mounds. And it's, to me, they're like spiritual doors for that helper, and just different ways of thinking about doors and archways too, and windows, and that you can enter these new spaces. And so when I started to work with this rectangle shape and archway, that's what I was thinking. And that's when thought and emotion started to enter the works too. And Sunbeam, you know, the sun is our creator. That pops up in my titles a lot. You know, I have fun with my titles, because once the work is finished, I sit with it and I write down what is coming to mind. And for this work, I was thinking in the future, like what would our future look like, and would our designs and ways of thinking and interpreted still be there? And so I think so. I think we'll continue to have these as Blackfoot people, for us specifically. I think these are gonna survive. When the sun and moon go to gallop. And so I was asked to be a part of the Loom Indigenous Gallery, which is this really small window space downtown Gallup. And I was like, how can I work with this small space? And so I decided to do a mural, since it was such large windows, and work with that doorway that I had just discussed. And so the larger disc, of course, is the sun. The blue one is the moon. This is where pattern is sort of coming back to the work a lot, especially in mural form or wall painting form. The pattern really, I think, is fun to play with when it comes to large scale work. And this looked really great too at night. When the lights were on and you could see all of these bright colors coming out of these window spaces. So it was a lot of fun to be asked to work space, a smaller art space, but still a lot of fun. So this was my solo exhibition at Echo Mano, and I did a series of these serigraph on paper bags. And this was really the first time where I started to think of using a single shape and work with it in different ways. And so with the technique of screen printing, I was able to do these color gradation poles, really creating some cool, unique visual looks with these water-based inks. Of course, solid concentric discs, working with these different sized discs. And yeah, these works were really inspired by star maps and the top of those lodges, the cosmos. But what I think is important about this show is it started off when I moved into ledger drawings, which is my current practice. I was able to work with a single shape over and over and over, and that idea came from this series here. And so this was in 2020, right when the pandemic was getting started, and that cut me off from printmaking studios. And so I had to really think quickly, well, what can I do? I have a show coming up. This is at the II Museum of Contemporary Native Art store gallery there in the front space. And this show was coming up and I could no longer print, and so this is where I started to use my ledger paper. My father, like I said, is a ledger artist. He gave me some of my first sheets, and that's where I had been sitting with them for a number of years, and then finally I was like, okay, this is time to start using them. And so I'm using colored pencil, different brands. I use Holbein, Faber-Castell, and Pablo. Those are my favorite high quality colored pencils that I like to use. I'm using these antique sheets of paper. Like I said, my father gave me some of my first, and since then I've traded, have been gifted different sheets over time. And they come in all sorts of sizes and different backgrounds. But this was a lot of fun. I'm still using my same visual vocabulary that I've been working with in printmaking and murals, but now in ledger form. And ledger drawing, for people who don't know, it started in the mid-1800s, 1860s, with incarcerated Plains warrior artists. And prior to ledger paper, what we were doing, how we were documenting and recording, was hides, elk hides, bison hides, even on our lodge covers. And that was usually your coup stories, your success stories, your accolades, individually and collectively. So it's really about documenting and recording. And I was already doing that with my work. And so it felt really natural when I started to work with ledger drawings. This was a ledger show I had at the Blue Star Contemporary. I incorporated this mural with all of the smaller ledger works. This is Super Wanderer's Motion. Again, I'm thinking about our planets, our connection to the solar system, to these other planets. How are we connected? Not only as a Piikani person, but just as a human being. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. You can see how I'm using pattern within this large disc shape and playing with color. And so this was in 2021. And this was one of the works that was in that show. Again, looking at pattern, but playing with these circles, these rings. I like leaving the background open. That way you can see the actual ledger sheet. This is from 1926. When I'm often working with these ledger sheets, I'm thinking like, well, what's happening in that year? What's happening in that time frame? A lot of people ask me, does what's on the paper influence your work? You know, am I doing work about taxes? Not really. I'm doing, it's more the date, where it came from, and even the watermarks. So a lot of these ledger sheets have watermarks when you hold them up to the light, and they're all paper mills from the East Coast that are no longer, you know, in existence. And so that's another story. There's just multiple layers when it comes to the ledger drawing. This work, it will begin anew, created in 2022. This is where I really started to think about shapes differently, and I've been thinking about polygons and different sided shapes. Of course, this is a four-sided shape here, but that's where it started to bloom from there, adding more sides. And so this is just a great example because this is where I started to play with symmetrical polygons and irregular polygons, and still incorporating these discs inside of them, like the lodge designs, and color. And so I'm playing with sort of these tints of pure colors, and tints, tones, and shades. You know, that becomes a big thing with ledger drawing for me. With ledger drawing, I was really able to expand my color theory, my color knowledge, color relativity, how colors react with one another. And so ledger drawing has been a lot of fun for that reason. The murals have continued. And so this was a solo exhibition I had at Echoe Mano in 2023, Cosmic Fragment for Renewed Vitality. To me, this is a fragment. I'm starting to pull these sections out of those lodge designs and work with them in much smaller, but of course this is blowing up this sort of fragment in a way, and working with window space again, but wall space, you know, two different walls, having the colors meet, and having the colors switch was a lot of fun to work with. And it's such a minimal, geometric, you know, abstraction, and it tells so many stories. This is Heading Home, Where the Power of the World Exists. So to me, that's, you know, back in Montana, back in Alberta, Blackfoot Confederacy territory. That's where the power of the world exists to me. And so this piece, I incorporated 3 large ledger sheets to make a triptych. And so with ledger sheets, they're only so large. This is kind of the largest, if a single sheet of this. That is one sort of large sheet. And so I was trying to think, how can I make ledger drawing larger? How can I play with scale? And that's when I started to incorporate, you know, 2 sheets and 3 sheets, which is a lot of fun to play with. And then the polygon, which reminds me of like a butte in Montana or even a mesa. And then I have complementary colors, so this red, orange, and this blue, green, playing with tints, tones, and shades of those colors. There's just a lot of different things I was exploring with this work and making it large. And this work actually won first in ledger drawing last year at the Santa Fe Indian Market. So I was really happy about that and getting that acknowledgement, because ledger drawing is really, if you see it now, if you're familiar with it, it's very representational, it's very figurative. It's warriors on horses, that's what my dad does. And I'm just a different generation looking at it differently. And so these last two slides is what I've really been focused on lately. This one's called Glacially Deposited Big Rock, going back to those glacial erratics, playing with shapes. So this is a 7-sided polygon, and black and white. That's some of my favorite color combo, just because it's high contrast, and those shapes that those rocks create, they're so powerful. They're so, like, this was very intuitive for me to create. Most of my work is very measured out, measurements, mathematical. This one, I knew I wanted a flat bottom and to have this sort of chunky base, but then I just kind of went with it where I wanted to fill. Of course, the paper, dictates the composition of the work, but this one was really a lot of fun to work with and sort of dive deeper into the rock research and history of those rocks. So this is where my work has been going lately, is working with these rocks and being inspired by them, and going back to that big rock lodge in the beginning, the black and white photo. And so I end with this work, which is titled Layered in Land and Cosmo Experiences. Again, I'm pulling, like I said, from the bottom portion, which is the land, the earth portion, and then the cosmos. And this was just a lot of fun. This is the Museum of Art in Kalispell, Montana. That closes tomorrow, actually. And you can see the paper bag works are part of this show. But what was really fun was to create this mural. The Hockaday is a landscape, Western type museum. Very realistic works, figurative, old Western scenes. And so I have my work in here, which is so colorful and bright. And Kalispell is about 2 hours away from my reservation. And so it was nice to have this connection between our two towns, because to me, I never saw that growing up. And it just seemed like we were over there and they're over there, even though we come to Kalispell, which is a larger city, to shop and do all our business. There always felt like there was this disconnect. And that's just how it is in Montana in general. There's still these tension, I guess you could say. So I was really thankful to be invited to have a solo show there and to share Piikani art, Blackfoot art with these new audiences. And so that is how I relate to pattern, historically, culturally, visually, artistically. And I hope you guys enjoyed that speech. So thank you all again. And so now we can open it up for Q&A. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer your question. Yes?
Thank you, Terran. That was awesome. I love seeing you at Indian Market, selling out. Can you talk a little bit about Indian Market, your relationship to it, and what you think of it in general, in terms of Santa Fe and at large for indigenous communities?
Yeah, so I'll be in Indian Market again this year. This will be my 4th year participating. It's definitely, I think I'm providing this different look at Native art. I think people think of Native art as very figurative, warriors, what we see a lot at the market. And so what I'm trying to provide is just this fresh outlook. And it's nice to enter works and, of course, be awarded is so great. But to me, it's this acknowledgement from, the peers, the Native community, that what I'm doing in terms of ledger art is, actually connecting with people. And I've had, a lot of success with it, with Indian Market. I take it serious. It's, it's the best Native market out there. So many people come for it. And I've gotten a lot of opportunities from being a participating artist. Yes?
I just have a question about your technique on your ledger art. You had said, like, with the big rocks that you kind of knew intuitively what you were going to do there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you sketch things out quickly with the pencil and then get your rulers out, or do you start with the ruler?
I start with the rulers. So, you know, of course, line is a big part of my work because that's what I start with. So I start with pencil first and then move on to micron pens and then the color adding into that. But yeah, that's how I start.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Yes?
I'm also curious on one of the pieces of the technique. On some of the ledgers, you have a white like the white lines,
Mm-hmm.
but it almost makes it look like the paper is brand new, where you put the white down, so you see like a little bit of.
Yes.
Black. Is that with colored pencil or what?
Yes, yeah, so some of the pencils are more, you know, the writing can come through more for certain colors, and yeah, I think that's great. I think it just adds, you know, another visual element to the work when you can see that, even though the color pencil sort of smears it a little sometimes when you look closely. I'm fine with that. That's just the nature of colored pencils and working in that way.
Looks incredible.
Thanks. Yes?
I was wondering, I could guess about this, but why you did not want to represent the middle portion of the teepee?
Yeah, so like I said, those lodges are transferred, you know, through a ceremony, and the protocol or the rule amongst Blackfoot Confederacy people is never copy or duplicate someone's entire lodge and make your own. And so as an artist who's working with works on paper, you know, I'm not painting lodges myself. I thought it was best for me to only pull certain areas. And it's okay, there's other artists from my community who do those animals, who do the full lodge. But I just personally chose not to. And if I do, it would be at another time where I have it fully thought out. Any other questions? Yes?
So when the lodge gets to the point where it then goes back to the land, is there any space for the family to then reinvent what the design is going to be, or do they really memorialize what was created?
Yeah, the image is locked. It's
The image is locked.
so, and how the images get to the people is through dreams, and so that's another aspect. You know, so the map of my nation, I could spend a whole slideshow explaining who the Blackfoot people are and the history. The images of the painted lodges, I could spend a whole presentation on just those lodges. There's so much knowledge involved with them, and what I shared today is just surface knowledge, you know, the tip of the iceberg. But they come through dreams, and these animals come to them and give them that design. And so for us, in historic times, old ancient times, you know, animals could speak to us too, and they would give us things through our dreams. And so that's how they come about, which is so amazing. And if they're not through dreams, then they're transferred. So that person didn't have to dream of that. They could actually be that owner could give it to someone else. And so there's different ways they move around and get created. So. Yes.
Oh, well, that's okay? All right, I think one more question.
So practically, no, then let somebody else go. It's fine. Okay. Well, I'm so curious because they're so tall. So are they painted flat?
Yes.
On the ground?
Yes.
Raised up?
And it was so there were certain people in the community that you sought out to paint your lodge, and then he had the community at large come in and help him fill everything in. And so it was very communal project. That it was spread out on the plains. They used, in historic times, willow sticks for the lines, bison sinew for the circles, and yeah, just different, and bison bones for the ink, like line work. So yeah, there was, and then all the pigments were natural earth pigments from different things, and we could really go into those too, but due to that. Well, thank you all for joining us today.